few bombs in the town. If a bomb happened, it was like people would go down there, clean it up. There'd be bomb damage sales, which were handy because you know, buy a hairdryer for next to nothing, but it smelled of burning rubber.
Colm Tohill recalls growing up during a time of violent conflict in Northern Ireland with a mix of stoicism and dark humour. This is Writer's Mosaic, What We Leave We Carry, the series that tells the true life stories of migration to the UK.
I'm from a small town in Northern Ireland called Warrenpoint in County Down. So that's near a large border town called Newry. I identify as Irish. I first moved as a permanent move to England when I was 20, so that would have been 1991. Warrenpoint's a small town. It sits at the foot of the Mourne Mountains and it's on the edge of Carlingford Lough, and it's a beautiful town. I lived in a council estate in a cul-de-sac, and we had it was a predominantly Catholic town, nationalist town, but we had Protestant neighbours and everybody got on, and it was lovely. It was by the seaside. You had the countryside just out your back door as well, so you had a bit of everything there, and it felt like a safe enough place to grow up in the 70s, where we were let to go out, run around and do whatever we got up to when we were kids. Obviously the backdrop to that at the time as well is that I was born in 1971, so we were in the middle of the conflict that was going on in Northern Ireland at the time. We got off pretty light in comparison to some other towns that had a lot more sort of violence that was going on, but it's not to say that we weren't affected by it at all, and unfortunately I have some traumatic memories from growing up there when I was a child. You did have the army going around the town in jeeps and stuff, and you know, it's funny because some of the regiments that came through the town would be they'd all be very different to each other, and you had certain regiments that had a different reputation. So there would be times that certain ones like the Black Watch or the paratroopers, when they came to town, you would feel that level of oppression would just sort of ramp up a bit, and that would be anything from just random checkpoints to just their general demeanour and behaviour when they were there in the town. There were unfortunately times, however, when it did come pretty close, you know, and that's when I say when Warrenpoint did suffer some of the bombs and shootings that other places were getting, so yeah. My parents were both musicians. I come from a musical family. My brother, there's my mum and dad, and then I have two other siblings, and we all played musical instruments. I used to play the piano and I used to play the trumpet, but I did start off playing the triangle in the brass band that my dad was a conductor in. So my mum and dad both played in the Ceilidh band in Ireland in the late 50s and early 60s. And so yeah, I was surrounded by music, and my brother, who I shared a bedroom with, is 8 years older than me, so he was the right age for punk, really, and so I had the influence of that, whether I liked it or not. You know, sitting in the bedroom, it'd be another album would turn up, another single would turn up, and then it would be like, right, I'd listen to it. And I'm actually really grateful for it as well, because it did help shape my musical taste over the years, which I'm quite happy about. Having a strong identity, like that cultural identity, was important to me growing up in Northern Ireland because of what was going on. And I probably felt safe enough in a small, predominantly Catholic town that, you know, I could be myself there as well. When I did visit other towns, then yeah, maybe I wouldn't have been flaunting it, let's say. Not, I don't know what I would have been flaunting, but I was a bit more cautious about what I said and who I spoke to, which was very much the vibe at the time. Probably for me, the years I would have supported the whole Republican movement. I'm very much still a nationalist and believe in the reunification. But I think at that time, probably from when I was about 13 till I was 16 or 17, that was a big part of my identity. We were learning Gaelic in school as well. It wasn't my favourite class, but we did projects in Gaelic, and basically most of the class, all the lads in my class, their project was on the Easter Rising. I was in Belfast for a little bit. So I was a wee bit reckless in Belfast, I would say. I'd come out of, you know, the home environment, very much wanting to sort of spread my wings a bit, and it was 1990, so the rave scene had kicked off as well, and I had a strong interest in that, and that was, you know, something that I got really involved in. Leading up to that, I think when I was living in Warrenpoint, there were a couple of events that I started to just question my own sort of the support that I seemed to be given for a movement that had basically come to Warrenpoint and blew the centre of the town to pieces, really, you know. And in that attack on the police station, we lost a girl that lived down the road from us who was only 18, and I still go and visit her grave every time I go over. And my grandmother was also injured in that attack and probably never really properly fully recovered from it either. I only lived in Belfast for probably 6 months. I was able to move around parts of Belfast that some people who maybe lived there wouldn't have ventured into certain areas, but I did. But I was just, I think, I'd like to say I was quite ballsy, but I think I was probably more naive than anything else. When I was there, I was seeing a girl who was from a very loyalist part of Belfast, and she was great. She was on the rave scene as well, and she was lovely. But I did end up at her house on the 12th of July once, in the middle of East Belfast. Her sister's boyfriend was coming in his band uniform, and they knew rightly I was Catholic. But at the same time, it was quite a scary place to be, because she lived up the Newton Arts Road, and while I was staying up there, a Catholic girl had been kicked to death at the back of one of the social clubs just up the top of the street from where I was staying. So there was that, you know, it was just getting a wee bit dangerous for me. But to get out of her house and get back down into a safe part of Belfast, I had to borrow a top of a certain football team that gave me rite of passage to get down the Newton Arts Road. I wore a Rangers top. I had a Rangers top on, and I walked down to the nearest taxi rank, and I got a taxi, and they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I need to get to Jerusalem, straight down the Holy Land." And he said, "Right," and he put me in the cab, and when I was getting out of the taxi, he goes, "You want to be careful around here wearing that top?" And I just turned around and went, "Yeah, fuck him." When you sort of grow up in an environment like that, you spend a lot of time looking over your shoulder. There's a level of anxiety that you're probably not even aware of. And like I said, in that town, there was a few bombs in the town. If a bomb happened, it was like, people would go down there, clean it up. There'd be bomb damage sales, which were handy, because you buy a hairdryer for next to nothing, but it smelled of burning rubber. You just sort of become very used to it, and it wasn't until I moved to England that I started to recount stories of things that had happened and things that I'd experienced, and then I would actually get like a tremor. Sometimes I would be very, very anxious talking about it, and realise the kind of trauma that you weather when you're there, and it's only when you come out of it that you kind of go, oh yeah, that wasn't, for people living over here, they probably had other stuff going on, but they didn't have that level of day-to-day kind of anxiety, you know. I said goodbye to a few close friends, and I was DJing at the time as well, so I had a load of records, but I couldn't carry everything across, so I packed a barrel bag, one of the wee kit bags. I came in one of them. That was it. It'd been August 1991. I mean, I hadn't told any of my family that I was getting out of Ireland. I was just gone. I do remember standing at the back of the boat and crying, you know, because it wasn't it was kind of one of those things when I just had to, it was time to go time. And it just wasn't going to work out for me back there. I think not having told the family that I was getting out of there as well, which I'm sure they were probably pleased that I'd got out of Belfast and was heading over to England, really. I was a bit downtrodden, a bit heartbroken. I had to leave this girl behind that I really liked as well, you know, so it's a massive move, you know. I'm only like 20, still a bit wet behind the ears. I liked England. I mean, that's the thing, is going back to my childhood as well. We would go camping in Europe every summer. And my parents had the long school holidays. They were both teachers, you see. We'd always make our way down through England. And we'd always make a stop at Manchester at my Uncle Sid and my Aunt Rosie's. And they were relations through my mum's side of the family. And I always remember that feeling of everything feeling calmer and a little bit more modern when I came to England. There was just that sense of, it was probably more the sense of calm that you know, and I'm not saying, you know, Warrenpoint wasn't a mad town or anything, but it was, you know, just there was still an atmosphere there. Because of my interest in the whole music scene and the rave scene as well, then I had more direct access to the stuff that I really wanted to go to. I was living with my brother. Yeah, we had good crack together. So he had the bedroom, because he was there first, and I had the living room floor. So we had a wee two-seater sofa. I used to pull the cushions off that, and then that was my bed, and I was probably there on that for, I would say, the guts of a year. It was fine. I remember going down to Greenwich Job Centre to sign on, and it was the first time I'd ever signed on. I started work when I was 17. I left school, went to catering college, and then got work experience in a bakery and just took that and then never went back to the college. I'd never signed on, so I went down to Greenwich to sign on, and I really didn't know what to do at all, you know, so I went up and signed a few forms and stuff, and I got this cheque passed across the counter, and I think it was for about £17. And I said, so I'd like come back tomorrow or next week. She went, oh no, that's for 2 weeks. So I was like, I think it must have been like emergency income support or something. I really remember I walked back from Greenwich as well. I wasn't getting the bus, you know. And I remember walking back and feeling absolutely gutted that was it. So I'm not sure I worked, never have been. And my brother knew somebody who ran a cafe, and she said, "You ever get him on board?" So I started working in the cafe. And it was run by a gay couple of women, and that was my first introduction to like lesbianism and all of this. So this all, you know, even from living in Belfast, like, you know, I remember coming over and kind of go, so right, so okay, so all right, there's all these people and that's cool, that's brilliant, and then there was walking up Deptford High Street for the first time and being totally blown away, you know, and just the culture that was around me, the diversity that was there, and just not in a bad way at all, but just feeling like, right, I'm looking around and there's more people of colour here than there is me, and that was I think the first time in my life I felt like in that street at that moment I was in the minority because of the colour of my skin, and I thought that was an interesting thing. I thought it was a very good thing to have happened to me, in a way that I could appreciate what that feels like, and living in a very rich, culturally rich area like South East London, where you have a lot of Caribbean culture and Indians as well, and it was brilliant, yeah. Well, it took a while before we could afford to go out and eat. Before that, it was Stavaloy and chips and cheese and onion pasties and stuff. And but yeah, I mean, I remember the first Indian restaurant, a proper Indian restaurant I went to up in North London, and just being blown away because you had a booth and you got a hot towel at the end of it, and it was, you know, things come out, and it was just all, yeah, it was brilliant. I thought it was really exciting. I always felt like I was too big for my hometown in a way, socially, you know, and with my visits to England as well, and my brother being there, then it just made it more of a want for me, really, to go. So I worked at their cafe for a while, and then there was a guy who used to make sandwiches there. He set up a cafe in Lewisham and asked me if I would come and manage it for him. So I became the manager of the Delicious Pig diner in Lewis Grove and just off Lewisham High Street. And I worked for a guy called Dean, and I lived above Marks and Spencer's on Lewisham High Street, above where the market was. I missed my mum. They would come over the odd time, really, but we'd be going over for Christmas and stuff, you know. And but yeah, I missed my family, you know, and I missed some of my mates. And I used to love going back, because in the early days of going back home, you were almost like, Colm's coming back, you know. You had almost kind of weird sort of celebrity status, like you walk in the pub and they're like, oh no way, you know, and that kind of thing. I wasn't drawn to going to Irish clubs or finding out where the local Cultúr meet up was and stuff like that. I just wasn't, I just didn't feel like that was where my interest lay at the time, really. It's funny because I think, was I ditching my culture in a way? I don't know. I was just engrossed in, you know, all the other stuff that was going on. I'd kind of had enough. There was that awful bomb in Omagh that just sat with me I was devastated, really. And I remember just it took me a while to get over that one as well, really. And I think, looking back, when we had that big bomb in Warrenpoint, and Joanne was really tragically killed in that as well, that I guess it sort of taps into a bit of that post-trauma, you know. So yeah, there was, you know, obviously you feel relieved, and there's progression happening over there, and people are starting to talk and things are calming down. And it's funny because I remember going back one Christmas after the Good Friday Agreement had been made, and I noticed for the first time that there was still, you'd see the odd army patrol out in the streets. And what I really noticed, and it might have just been in this moment as well, but it struck a chord with me, was there was about half a dozen soldiers out on patrol going up the road towards where my parents live. And you can see for about a quarter of a mile, you can see the fella at the front, and usually when they had a patrol like that, they would have it balanced out, so you'd have 3 on each side of the road. And the 2 at the back would nearly always walk backwards. And I noticed this time that the 2 at the back were walking, and they didn't turn around once, and I was walking behind them. And I thought that was just, and like I say, that might have just been that moment in time, but for me that was, if I'm reflecting back on what if I'd seen any changes, then that would have been one of the ones that it felt quite poignant, really, just to see that there was a level of like, okay, it's actually okay now, we can walk normally for a change. And I joke about it with my dad, like, you know, but I'll go back and make some Republican references, and he'll kind of go, no. He said, no, that's all over now. And I am really joking. No, he said, you're too long gone. He said, you still think the war's on, don't you? And I'm like that last Japanese soldier who eventually surrendered in 1950 something. You know? I've had CBT, I've had psychodynamic counselling, I've been through it all. I used to have to pay for it, and then I found an organisation based in London called ICAP, and ICAP was set up for Irish people living in England who need access to affordable counselling, and it's funded as well. So the last bout I think I had for about 3 years, and I never paid a penny. I think my case was quite strong for them to provide the counselling and not really question it too much either. I moved to Brighton in 1994. Yeah, there was a few of us came down, and then we'd started finding out about the beach parties that were happening as well. So I was starting to get a wee glimpse of Brighton and kind of going, oh, this is all right down here. Well, I mean, I've been here 30 years now, so, and it does feel like, well, it obviously feels like home now. But it did feel, I preferred it to London when I moved as well. Everything was a wee bit easier, you know, the air was cleaner, all the usual stuff. I still feel very connected, obviously. I still feel very Irish, even though I've lived in England longer than I lived in Ireland. I have a real love for my hometown. But at the moment, my desire to move back isn't as strong as it has been at other times. The heart was pulling me back and the head was saying no. You know, it's one of those ones, and I think, I don't know if that's sort of probably strikes a bell with a lot of Irish people, but there is, you know, it's a different pace of life. You can go a bit easier, but that's a sort of romanticising it a bit as well. But there's the actual day-to-day reality too, you know, so I feel the heartstrings will pull the odd time, and then I'll start looking at the houses and going, oh, a little farmhouse, and I could do that up, and then I kind of go, but I've got such a network of friends here and so much to do here. My life's really busy here that I think at this point in my life I wouldn't be ready to move. But I do like going back to my hometown. It's very different to how it was when I was growing up. Osha is my eldest, and then Oren, and they're two very Irish names, and then there's Maisie. But they're all really, really proud of that fact, you know, and they can all do a pretty good Irish accent as well. Mum passed away in 2017, and Dad's gonna turn 90 next year. Living at home on his own, still driving. I'm very, very much self-sufficient, and definitely has like his faculties about him and that. So yeah, he's still going strong. My brother and sister are over there, got my nieces and nephews over there. And I guess, you know, that's kind of what I miss the most, is those guys, you know, because when I'm with my sister and my brother, we all really get on very, very easily together. Brighton's kind of like, it's not really, it's kind of like England, but it's not as well. It's not all of Brighton either, but there's just that general vibe here is that everybody's a wee bit more, you know, tolerant, empathic, supportive, fun, interesting, experimental, all of that kind of stuff that goes on down here. And I feel like I couldn't, I would struggle to live anywhere else in England. I feel like I can be myself, and especially where I work and DJ in Brighton as well. That's my little microcosmos, that's my village. I'm very appreciative of Brighton for allowing me that.
Colm Tohill was talking to Suzanne Harrington.